So Pastor Thompson, you've got some adult children that are married and have established their own homes. And this is something that I'm very curious about because my kids are obviously one day going to get married and leave the home. I've got 6 kids. My oldest is 13, so we're a few years away from that. But I'd like to just learn about your experience, how that transition went from having your kids in your home under your authority to them getting married and moving out and establishing their own families.
Yeah, well, I always knew that day would come, and it's actually a little bit bittersweet. I mean, we were happy to marry off 3 of our children, and of course, you did the weddings for 3 of them. So, but it was bittersweet. It's wonderful raising a family and having children in your home, but obviously, we're in all different phases of life as we continue through our lives, and the transition, in my mind, went very well. We felt like the people that we married our children off were good people that were godly Christians that were in the same belief as our children were, and the transition was it was difficult. I was a little emotional, but you've raised these children your whole life, and now you are giving them over to somebody else. But the Bible teaches that you're supposed to leave and cleave, and so as far as we go, we knew that we were going to have to transition them off, and they're going to have to become their own family someday.
So even though you're still the parent, there's a shift in the authority structure. Because when they're in your home, you're the boss. They have to do what you say. But obviously that changes as they leave and cleave to their spouse. Now they've established their own home, their own authority. So it's not like you're still telling your adult kids what to do or when to go to bed or anything like that.
Right. Yeah, and I have absolutely no desire to have to do that. And I think that, you have to understand that once they are married and leave your home, then they're their own family structure. And so we still have one child at home, and he's under our authority, and he obeys us, and he has an authority structure under our guidance in our home.
Right.
And but our children, they have their own family. And my son's, my son Remy is he's the leader of his own household. And so I don't go and take, even though I'm a pastor, which kind of changes the dynamic a little bit with me because I'm my children's pastor at the same time. So, but there's realms that we need to learn what we're supposed to be doing as far as in their realm of authority. Yeah. So I'm my children's dad, and they should respect me, but they don't have to listen to what I say. And my daughters were married off to men, and once I gave them away at the marriage altar, then they became under the authority of their husbands. Right. And so I don't interfere with their marriage and how to raise their children or anything like that. Now, obviously, I'm there for them. I'm there to help them. And I definitely am part of their lives, and they're part of ours. But as far as that transition, you have to understand that, once they leave and cleave, once they leave the home, they're married to somebody else, and they're no longer under that structure.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously when they're in your home, they're listening to you, they're obeying you. When they leave the home, we still want to have influence with our children, but obviously we can't tell them what to do. It's very important that we as parents do our due diligence to make sure that before we marry them off, that we're marrying them off to good people. Obviously people that are saved, people that love the Lord, that are serving the Lord. Because once they say, I do, it's done. Once the pastor asks the question, who giveth this woman to be married to this man? And your response is, her mother and I, then you're done. And in your situation, you have to have very clear lines of your authority, right? Because you're the dad. But now that they're married, you're not the boss necessarily, although you still want to have influence and have influence in their lives. But you're also the pastor, so there's authority structure there as well. And of course, when your kids get married and establish their own home, not only are you dealing with adult children that are not married, but now you're also dealing with in-laws. You have son-in-laws, you have daughter-in-laws. You're an in-law, your wife is an in-law. Tell me a little bit about that. How much involvement, if any involvement, should the in-laws be having in the marriages of their adult children?
Well, I would say 0, as far as unless they're coming to you for advice, but even that can be a slippery slope because you don't want to be running someone else's marriage. Obviously, we'll give out advice that we could help them with, but we definitely don't want to try to interfere with how someone's dealing with the other person in their marriage. We try to help them how they could be better and how they could be a better spouse. But as far as telling the other spouse, the in-law, to tell my son-in-laws how to run their marriage, that's not right for me to do because, again, it's leave and cleave. And so they're responsible to take care of their own house. Now, if they come to us for advice, and obviously as a pastor, if they come to me for spiritual advice, I'm going to do the best I can to give them the best spiritual advice that I can. But I definitely don't agree with parents getting so involved in their adult children's marriages that, you know, it becomes like a strain or a drain on that other person. Right. And obviously in-laws, you know, they don't know you as well as your kids do. Right. And so the in-laws, but I have wonderful in-laws, yeah. So I'm very happy for that. But that's part of the process of marrying them off is, are you marrying them off to someone that you trust, someone that you know is going to take care of your daughter, or that's going to be a good wife to your son? Right. And those things are done before the marriage process takes, you know, and you can do the best you can. Yeah. Nobody's perfect. No marriage is going to be perfect. Nobody's going to be the perfect spouse for your child. Yeah. Everybody makes mistakes. Right.
That's one thing I was going to mention. I've noticed about you and your wife. It seems like you guys have a really good relationship with your son-in-laws, with your daughter-in-law, and that's part of it, right? Because for us as pastors, maybe it's a little easier to understand because as pastors, we lead adults and we can't lord over God's heritage. So when grown people within our churches, they need help, they need advice, oftentimes we have to tell them, hey, this is a decision you need to make, but let me help guide you if you want to know what the Bible says. And in some ways, that's almost how we have to transition with our adult children, right? Yeah. We want to influence them, we want to help them, but we can't be making decisions for them, we can't be telling them what to do. And we want to be careful about interjecting ourselves into their marriage. You know, something that I would consider, I know as a pastor, when I'm trying to help couples, I have to maintain neutrality. You don't want to take one side versus another. And I would imagine with in-laws, you want to be careful with that, right? You know, because it's your little girl, right? But you married her off to this young man. So you want to be for both, not against, you know. And I know you have that, you strike that balance. Let me ask about this. It seems like sometimes parents who are older, have been established, they've raised their children, then they send them off and they want to be a blessing to their kids, but they do a lot financially, stepping in with gifts and not really allowing the kids to struggle. Have you noticed that? What are your thoughts on that?
You see the doting grandparents and the doting parents that still continue to take care of them like an entitlement. It's almost like a welfare system for their own children. And you do have to let your children struggle. You have to let them learn how to parent. But obviously, you're not just leaving them high and dry. If they need something, if something's an emergency, or you know, there's a real big need or something like that, then obviously we'll step in and help. Yeah. But our children, once they leave and cleave, they need to understand that it's their responsibility to the men to run their own households and work and bring in money so that they can provide for their family. Right. And also for the wives to learn to obey their husbands and be subject unto them and to be good mothers to their children and love their husbands. That's what we strive to do and strike a balance in our children's lives, is that, you know, and obviously you can't be a respecter of persons. A lot of times people say that blood's thicker than water, and a lot of times it is, but like you can't be a respecter of persons even when it's in your own children when it comes to judgment. And obviously I'm not there to judge their marriages and the way that they parent their children, but I feel like we strike a balance in our kids' lives. We try to help them when we can, but we don't want to help them so much that they don't know how to help themselves.
I like the idea that it really is a balance, because obviously in times of emergency, you know, if you can step in and help and be a blessing, you know, then we want to do that. But we don't want to just become these enablers, and we don't want to just, we're paying their rent, we're buying their groceries, because there is strength in struggling a little bit. I remember when I got married, my dad, I remember a very specific conversation. He took me in the garage just a few weeks before I was going to get married. He wanted to have a talk with me. He was saying, we're cutting off the umbilical cord. And my parents obviously were there, and my wife's parents were there emotionally and all those things. But in a lot of ways, it was good for us to struggle financially. It's good for us to have to save up money and purchase things on our own. So you want to strike that balance. And then parents that are just interfering and meddling in their adult children's marriages and lives, maybe they didn't prepare their kids when they were still in the home, and they're trying to make up for that after they maybe see some of the mistakes they're making as adults. So it seems like the key, something I've heard you say, is to really prepare them before that day at the marriage altar. What were some of the steps that you took with your older kids as they were transitioning into adulthood to really prepare them and make sure they were ready to be the good husband, to be the good wife, to choose the right spouse?
I think having strong parameters when it comes to dating is when they start to, this is when that transition is going to take place and you see it coming and you're like, you dread the day kind of, but at the same time, you're happy for them. And so I think it's very important that we try to, well, what I did is that I set strong boundaries when it came to dating. These are the types of people, like you're gonna date a Christian.
Right.
You're gonna, not hold hands, not sit next to each other in the same car. You know what I mean? I was pretty strict on those rules and that there always had to be somebody around. I don't agree with two young people going off by themselves and doing all these adventures by themselves. I just don't think that's right. And so I try to keep my kids in a position where they could stay pure and stay true to the time they got to their wedding altar. Right. And so I felt like, obviously other things I prepared my son Remy to do is to work and get ready. Like if you can't support a household, then how are you going to get married? You can't put the cart before the horse. And so a work ethic with my sons, and then obviously teaching our daughters how to cook and take care of, obviously they would cook and help take care of me. But those are things you just prepare them for, and how to, you show them as an example. Also, like my example of how I love my wife and how she loves me and how we treat each other, that's going to rub off on them and help prepare them for the future.
Yeah, you help them see what a marriage is supposed to be like,
right?
What good parents are supposed to be like by setting the example over the years that they were in your home. Yeah. And I agree with you 100% on young couples that aren't married spending time alone. There's going to be a lot of time for them to be alone when they're married. A lot of time for them to be off and doing adventures when they're married. And obviously you want to let them get to know each other, but it should be supervised and all of those things. I often tell myself this, and I tell our church family, it's important for people in my stage of life when my children are young to remember that we're not raising children, we're raising adults. We're raising children that are going to grow up to be adults. And I know I watch you with your family, I see your kids, and I have a lot of respect. Obviously, I know nobody's perfect, but I have a lot of respect for the fact that you've been able to raise kids that love the Lord, that as adults serve and love the Lord. They're soul winners, and I think that's something that we should all be striving for. So
absolutely.
Praise the Lord.